Instructions for accessing subtitles in a language other than English are included on our board meetings webpage as well as in the description below. Instrucciones para acceder a los subtítulos en un idioma que no sea el inglés se incluyen en nuestra página web de reuniones de la Junta, así como en la descripción a continuación.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023, and this is the Ross Valley School District Board of Trustees regular meeting. It is 6 o'clock, and calling the meeting to order, and we will be starting with a closed session. We have several items tonight on our closed session. I'll read them off what we have, and then we will go ahead and take public comment on items on our closed session. So tonight's closed session, we have a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation with significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, Special Education Program Dispute. We have public employee discipline, dismissal, release, reassignment. We have conference with real property negotiators on 199 Porteous Avenue. And we have conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, which is all employee groups, RVTA, CSEA, confidential classified management, and certificated management. So before we recess into closed session, I know we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got 5 comment cards here. Does anyone else have any other public comment cards for closed session items? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move into taking public comment on any of the closed session items. And I just wanted to let you know everybody will have 3 minutes, and we are here to hear what you have to say and to listen to what you have to say for our deliberations on an item. With public comment, we don't get into a back and forth with public comment, but definitely want you to know that we are listening and hearing what you have to say and then taking that into account when we have our conversations. So I know sometimes it feels strange to come up and make a public comment, but not to get any response back right then. So I just wanted to let you know kind of how that works and that we are listening and appreciating you being here and sharing your opinion with us. So on that note, I will let's have Muriel Jenks. Mira. Muriel. Thank you, Muriel. Come on up, and you'll have 3 minutes. You want to do our timer for us? We'll have an alarm go off with 30 seconds left, just so that you can have a couple seconds.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Muriel Jenks. I teach kindergarten at Brookside. I've been in this district for 12 years, and I've been a teacher here for 8 years. I worked really hard to get my teaching job in Ross Valley because it was the one and only one for me. It was the place that had my heart, and I was willing to wait and make it work. And I used to feel that even if I won the lotto, I would continue working here. We want the best for our students, and I want the best for my students. But wanting the best for our students comes with valuing those who provide that to our students. I have completed 8 years of college. I have taught 5 years in France and 8 years here. In my free time, I do like to read about developments in our field, especially the exciting things that are happening in the area of reading. I'm curious. I keep current. But I'm starting to feel not valued for my professional skills. This last summer, my daughter, who is 19, came back from college. She found her summer job working at the Barefoot Cafe in Fairfax. She was very nervous because it was her first time waitressing. We went out shopping, got her black pants, her white shirts, her non-slippy shoes, an apron. She had training for 7 days. Mostly wine and the register. So I was shocked, but also deeply saddened when my daughter after her training period, showed me her first paycheck outside of her training hours. My 19-year-old daughter, at her very first waitressing job, made more money than me. We need to keep teachers here in our district. Ross Valley School District teachers need to be valued. And would you like some fries with that? Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Hayhurst.
My name is Rebecca Hayhurst, and I also teach kindergarten and TK at Brookside Elementary School. This is my 16th year in the Ross Valley School District. I love teaching, the support and collaboration with my colleagues, the joy of being a child's first teacher, and the wonderful connections that I have built with the families that pass through my classroom each year. I love the Ross Valley School District, and I wish I could teach here forever. Sadly, I might not get my wish. For the first time, I have marked unsure on my intent to return form, not because I don't want to teach here, but because it has become unsustainable for my family, and I may be forced to look for employment elsewhere where I can earn a living wage. My family used to live in Fairfax, but eventually we were priced out of living in Marin and moved to Petaluma to find affordable housing. My salary here is low in comparison to the other districts I drive past on my commute. Even while working full-time with the maximum amount of units and halfway down the salary scale, my current salary is considered low income by the state, and my children qualify for public assistance. As a highly educated mid-career professional, I have to rely on Medicare to get healthcare for my kids. Healthcare costs for my husband and I take up 40% of my salary. With the rising cost of living and the current price of gas, there are months it is hard to make ends meet, and it is getting harder and harder to justify staying in Ross Valley. I don't want to leave. I am the teacher I am today because of Ross Valley. I want what is best for my students, and what is best for my students is keeping experienced educators like me in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pete Santucci.
Hello, my name is Pete Santucci. I'm a music teacher here in Ross Valley School District. Been here for 18, 19 years, something like that. And I spoke at a previous meeting, and I was saying that for the first time recently, this job has become so much more difficult that I have been considering looking outside the teaching profession. And that's true, but what I didn't have time to say is that I also wanted to say that I've also been considering taking jobs in other school districts. I have a lot of friends. I've lived in Marin now for a while, and I have a lot of friends who teach in other districts who've been asking me to apply for jobs in their district. And my son is here in Ross Valley, and I'm really lucky that I have affordable rent right now. I don't know when that will end. My landlord could end that at any time, but right now I'm lucky, so I've been able to stay. And I'm also really lucky that my wife has a job at University of San Francisco where she has full health care benefits for our son. So for that reason, I've been able to stay, and I have considered applying in other districts, but I haven't actually applied in other districts. But I realized, as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, I'm really only able to make those decisions because my son has health care and because my rent right now is really low. I'm lucky. Which is great because I love working here and I would love to keep working here. But I do worry about it, and I think about the stress increasingly over the past few years that I'm like, I have to wear a night guard now, because I at night am clenching my jaw, worried about, is this going to be okay? Are things going to be okay? I've recently started wearing a brace on my thumb because I was waking up at night and waking up in the morning, clenching my thumb from stress. And I don't feel like I have a high pressure job, but I really do. It's a lot of stress. You have the lives of those children in your hands every day. Their development, their social development, their intellectual development, but also their physical safety. And this is a hard job, and it's an important job. And it's worth considering that a lot of the other local districts have increased teacher salaries significantly over the last couple of years, and myself included, but a lot of my colleagues I know who live in those communities, I'm thinking, why would they stay here if they can make $10,000, $15,000 a year more in another local district? So I really urge you to consider that we need to try to keep these teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie McDonald?
Hi. Thank you for taking the time to hear our personal stories. My name is Marjorie McDonald, and I'm going to read the beginning of the statement, and my colleague Carly Shackwell will finish it when my 3 minutes are up. I have been a school psychologist for 12 years. It is my privilege to serve Hidden Valley and Wade Thomas schools in this role. I live in the community, and my oldest child is enrolled at one of our district schools in the 2nd grade, and my youngest child will enroll next year. Presently, the school psychologist salary schedule has only 4 steps. Since I began working in the district nearly 4 years ago, my earnings have been based on the last step since there's no further steps for me. Thus, I haven't received any meaningful salary increases. For bargaining this year, the Ross Valley School District Psychs and I conducted a compensation study of the earnings of our counterparts in this county. We found that the earnings in Ross Valley are competitive with the county until you have more than 5 years of experience. At 10 years of experience, our team earns nearly $8,000 less than the average earnings of a school psychologist in our county. And at 15 years of experience, we are earning $12,000 less than our counterparts. The numbers only become less desirable after this. This powerful data is not skewed by including the high school only salaries. I personally know the employee whose position I took nearly 4 years ago. She left the district for a very similar position only 3 miles away for more pay. I would earn over $18,000 more in that district with my experience. And it is not the local high school district. Recently, we presented the compensation study to our union bargaining committee and proposed the adoption of a new salary schedule that is based on the average pay in our county that has more steps so that our salary schedule would be able to retain experienced school psychologists. This is important to me because after only 3.5 years in this district, I am the most senior psychologist on our team of 3. During my first couple years in this district, I spent significant time mentoring 2 first-year psychologists who are both struggling in their positions. Presently, I have a team of 2 teammates who are experienced and not in need of mentorship. I appreciate the current state of being part of a team of experienced, thoughtful, and intelligent school psychologists that I can consult with on complex cases, and I hope this support does not end because even in this small district, situated in two idyllic towns, we work with students who have complex health issues, developmental delays, and previous traumas that make being part of a school community very difficult. We make critical recommendations, and I value having a team that I can collaborate with. We are often the first person to tell a family that their child has autism, a mental health disorder, an intellectual disability, or a learning disability.
Thank you. Holly?
So, continuing with Marjorie's statement, these are vulnerable conversations that have taken me years to learn to navigate so that the parent is left feeling informed, hopeful, realistic, and understood. I hope this year Ross Valley will demonstrate that these positions are valued so that we can continue supporting one of Ross Valley's most vulnerable population, our students with disabilities. This work is stressful, it's highly specialized and unique, and nobody is able to cover for me if I am absent. I am constantly navigating federally mandated special education timelines that do not stop over weekends and most breaks. The hours are long, the work is both technical and emotional, and there is never a sense of completion or closure. I realize that it can be hard for the board to get a pulse on how our certificated staff is feeling because there isn't a natural pipeline for information. So I'm here to share it with you. Your staff is overwhelmed, depleted, feeling taken advantage of, and disrespected financially. They feel hopeless after 1%, 2%, and 3% increases and multiple years of no increase. They are humiliated by our rank of lowest salary in the county and fearful that the salary has fallen so far behind that it may not be possible to recuperate after so many years of salary neglect. And lastly, they feel demoralized to have to advocate so hard for a COLA that our state government has approved with the expectation that it goes to salaries, but we have to fight for, demonstrate a compelling need for, and in a most public setting, prove our worth to receive it. I have no doubt that when you made the decision to serve on Ross Valley School Board, it was because you fully understood the impact educators and RVSD have on our community, our children, and their futures. Decisions made here also impact our lives, our families, and our professional morale. I hope that while we discuss the importance of our teachers earning a wage that is commensurate with their counterparts in this county, there is also consideration given to a salary schedule for the school psychologists and other certified roles so that Ross Valley can attract and retain professionals with experience and we can continue our focus on student wellness and achievement rather than on unfilled positions and the constant training of new staff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all again for your comments and sharing your perspectives and insights with us. And we have one more?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have one more. All right. Virginia.
My name is Virginia Foxton. I have the pleasure of teaching 8th grade language arts at White Hill Middle School. I'm in my 4th year of teaching, and my first year back into the classroom was the year of 1920, just in time for a pandemic. I'm going to tell you the story of why I made a transition out of corporate to come work at Ross Valley School District and the lesson that I learned in that process. I would like to go on record that your speech today was so on point, especially what you shared at the end about the information that feels important to know because there's not a feedback loop to stay in connection about what the experience is, what we want you to know. And so thank you for opening the forum to hear what it is that we want you to know. We love teaching these children. They are our own children. In my case, they are my own children, 2 of which are enrolled in the school district and have had the pleasure of having some of these fantastic teachers as their own. We look out for each other. We look out for other people's children. And our children deserve the best because they're our kids, not just my own children, but they're our children. We take care of them, we love them. Their education, their advancement, their purpose in life, who they're going to become, who they're going to lead when they get there. They're going to lead us. So what are we saying to them today that says you're valued? And everything we have is yours. We will put it on the line. We will sacrifice, and we do sacrifice as teachers, as certified staff, as administration, as board members, as district office employees. You are making sacrifices that say to our students, you are worth every bit of this. I came back to the classroom after 15 years of a corporate career where I kicked ass. I still kick ass. I just do it with way more purpose every single day. I took a pay cut. I make 1/4 of the salary I used to make, and I choked when I saw what my salary offer was, because even though it was my 10th year as an educator with a credential, 6th year with a credential, I started on the top left-hand corner, and my salary was just over $55,000. I'm grateful that I am in a partnership where I am financially subsidized and given medical insurance. That's not fair. I don't want to teach my daughter that she can be somebody's +1 and afford her life. It's not acceptable. So thank you for doing everything you can to make sure we know we're valued and that we get to keep leading the leaders of tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, thank you again for coming and talking with us. We are going to recess into our closed session, so we'll need to do that just with us. And then you're welcome back if you want to say anything for items that are not on the agenda or items that are on the agenda. But really appreciate you all coming and talking to us. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, March 8th. And this is still the Ross Valley School Board of Trustees regular meeting. We are now coming back from closed session and reconvening into open session at 7:06 p.m. And so to move forward with our open session, we start with a couple of procedural items for our open sessions. The Pledge of Allegiance and adoption of the agenda are the two procedural items before we move into the content of our meeting. We've recently formally added on our agendas that you'll see tonight's starting one with our Pledge of Allegiance. It's something we've been doing informally, which is before saying the Pledge of Allegiance in just kind of a performative way, we take a moment to have a bit of reflection on democracy, civic engagement, and what we were calling a mission moment to infuse the Pledge of Allegiance with meaning specifically that connects to us here in the Ross Valley School District. So tonight, before we say the Pledge of Allegiance, I just wanted to read a bit of a mission moment and read our racial equity mission statement for us this evening as part of our reflection. So the racial equity mission statement is a statement that was worked on for number of years. Parent guardians, staff, teachers, board members' input, and all of us as a community worked on together. And it really serves as a guiding light and a North Star for all that we do in the district. So the Ross Valley School District is committed to creating a safe, equitable, and inclusive learning environment in which all students feel a sense of belonging, are respected and celebrated for their individual differences, and are empowered to thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. We are equally committed to building the leaders of tomorrow who will combat racism and promote equity throughout their lives. Ross Valley School District parents, guardians, students, staff, and board trustees, in partnership, will create policies to disrupt systemic racism and prioritize equity in our organizational structures, curriculum, and instructional practices. We will do this by actively engaging, listening, and responding to the voices and needs of our marginalized students, families, and staff, and working to engage in anti-racist action that build a vibrant, inclusive learning community. And with that, I would invite you to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So choose. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Before we move forward, we need to adopt the agenda and the time allocations. Do my colleagues have any questions about the agenda, the sequencing? No questions. No questions? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second it. Motion and a second. Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. Shelley? Aye. Chris?
Aye.
Daniel, aye.
Daniel? Aye. All right. So we have our agenda. And now, on to our student presentation. So thank you and welcome. And we are really looking forward to hearing from White Hill this
Our
evening.
White Hill students and staff.
Thank you.
I just want to say to start that this is always an item that is a highlight of any of the Board of Trustees agendas, is to have our students and our staff come to our board meetings and talk about and share and demonstrate the awesome and fabulous things that you're doing at the site and in your classrooms. And so thank you so much for being with us this evening, and really can't wait to get started. So John and Mary Claire, do you want to begin?
You can stay where you are, yeah,
All right,
it's fine,
great.
yeah. Good evening, trustees, Superintendent Trahan, and all of the learning leaders and incredible Ross Valley School District families here who make this district such an amazing place to live, work, and learn.
I'm Mary Claire Mullen, one of the co-principals.
John Baker, the other co-principal, and we're proud to have this opportunity tonight to show off some of the great learning occurring in our classes. White Hill, as part of the Ross Valley School District, is committed to creating a safe, equitable, and inclusive learning environment where all students feel a sense of belonging. At White Hill, we have centered our equity work around the guiding question: how do we ensure that our students have agency? Student agency, the ability and knowledge to take action, create and deliver plans, and make informed decisions, is what we desire for all students. For students to develop agency, they must have their identity recognized and affirmed, experience a sense of belonging, and master the skills needed to apply their knowledge to novel situations.
To that end, our professional development this year at White Hill has really centered around the work of Zaretta Hammond, around culturally responsive teaching and the brain. And we know that belonging emerges in classrooms that foster deep relationships, what Hammond refers to as learning partnerships between the teacher and the student. And so through culturally responsive teaching strategies, such as being a warm demander, the teachers have been explicitly focusing on that relationship, that rapport, building rapport and trust with students. And through this relationship, it is that teachers are able to have the right to demand engagement and effort and hold high standards for students, and offer those instructional scaffolds and supports for our more dependent learners. At White Hill, we know that we want all of our students to become independent learners who have that academic as well as social emotional skills and the self-confidence and belief to be able to tackle challenges that they're going to face in their lives, that idea of them having agency.
We invited Ms. Pierce and Mr. Laughlin with a couple of our incredible students to present tonight to give a glimpse into how identity, cultural awareness, and academic skills are integrated into the classroom. In their 8th grade history classes, Ms. Pierce and Mr. Laughlin invite students to challenge the dominant narrative in history and lead their students to learn about the importance of multiple perspectives. Teaching multiple perspectives requires students to understand the context that create different points of view, care about people and the injustices they experience, and care about improving society to the benefit of everyone.
Okay, and so to that, a huge thank you to Ms. Pierce and Mr. Laughlin for being here, and for the two students, Magnus and Mira, for coming as well this evening. And also the other staff members who decided to stay and support their colleagues. We're happy to see you guys here as well. So we're going to hand it over to you guys.
Just one second, we're having a
Yep, I'm seeing that.
technical difficulty.
Should we just come up and get our chairs situated?
Sure.
Using a podium, I thought we'd
Come up.
stand, but I guess we can come up and sit.
Come up
Do we
again.
want to put Mira and Magnus in the middle? Mr. Rock and I on the bookends. You know, student centered.
All right, so I've got the clicker. Here you go.
They'll let us know though, they're not ready. We'll just hang out non-awkwardly.
Well, I know what we can do while we're waiting. All right, so I want to make sure I've got Magnus, and is it Mira, Kira? Mira, okay. Would you mind just introducing who you brought with you today? Or maybe someone brought you, or maybe your mom and dad, but you brought them, right? Because you're the ones who needed to be here tonight. So would you mind introducing who came with you this evening? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, should I use the microphone?
It's not an amplified microphone, but
that's
it
okay.
does go into the recording. So however you talk, everybody who's listening from at home, they can hear you. Yeah.
Cool.
And so you should be good.
So, I'm Magnus Pickle. I'm an 8th grade student at Whitehill, and today I brought with me my mom, who's over there. So, yeah. And
What's her name? Does she have a name besides mom?
Her name is Sisawagi, and yeah. So, I'm honored to be here.
Thank you so much for being here.
Mira Khan, also 8th grade student at Whitehill. I brought my mom and dad, Rosalind Khan and David Khan.
Thank you so much. Tech issues not solved yet. Let's see, what else?
Can we pull them up on, could we look at the presentation on our computer?
Who's your favorite teacher?
Trick question, don't answer.
This is a presentation thing. I'm wondering whether we have it on our.
Are you gonna need to see the screens to do your presentation?
It would be nice
Okay.
if I could grab my phone.
Well, here, I can give you my computer.
Yeah,
And if
either
that would
way.
work?
I mean, if
Okay.
ultimately if it doesn't go up, it's not the end of the world. We could bring it up, so that we know what you're looking at. Yeah, so if we had a shared computer, we'd be okay, just so we know we're on the same slide.
There's some student work though that you're gonna wanna.
Right, but if they
Yeah.
each have the presentation.
We can see it on our, we can see it up here.
As long as you
It's
can
just
see it.
not
Gotcha.
behind
And then
us or-
hopefully the tech issue will be solved soon and.
Yeah,
sure. And we'll
Welcome to exactly how we work, right?
Yeah,
We
perfect.
go
On
with
the fly,
the
on the
flow.
fly.
Adapt.
There we go. Let's wait, make sure we can get on the.
We have it.
All right. We've all got it in front of us, so.
Okay,
Yes.
so far so good.
Yeah.
Jorge's doing his magic over there.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm Yana Pierce, 8th grade history teacher, as we already established.
We are, yeah. I'm Sean Laughlin. I'm the other 8th grade history teacher. It's great to be here.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we'll just go that. So we're here today, tons of stuff we could have shared with you, of course. And rather than like this lesson, that lesson, et cetera, although we're bringing some highlights, we just want to give you the overall approach to history, because no matter what content we're looking at, what lesson we're looking at, it's the approach that matters, because that's the core essence of what we do, right? That's like the core principle. Hey, good job.
Yay.
All right, let's see how this will work the clicker, and
All
then
right, here we go.
we'll
Let's
be
see.
golden.
Ooh.
It's probably just a side to side, right?
Yeah.
No? Clicker, Jorge?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Reopen closed PDFs.
Oh, man, okay.
Yeah, it's on.
You might need to the thing.
To get rid of that little thing.
Yeah. Hit no thing.
Oh.
So thanks.
We're gonna do this. It's
Okay, you
gonna
got
happen.
this, you got this. I didn't know where
We
you
can
were
do it.
going.
Oh.
Too far, I did it. All right,
No, you
cool.
did it?
Do you want your
Okay,
computer
I'm
back?
gonna try mine. Okay, it works. It works.
All right, Darcy, do you want your computer back, or?
It's Ryan's,
Ryan, do you want yours back?
I'm good.
You're good for now, we'll sleep it, okay. So anyway, so we decided just to give you our overall approach at the beginning of the year, again, because it's a core principle. It's the underlying, no matter what content we're looking at, what lesson we're doing, there's often, different skills.
this is the core principle no matter what we're doing. So we brought a quote from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she talks about the danger of a single story. And we just brought one quote. We could have picked a ton of them. The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. They make one story become the only story, right? And so with that comes bias and assumptions and okay. We use a lot of the Stanford history lessons called SHEG for short. And this is one of the slides kind of talking about the approach to history. It's an account of the past, duh. Accounts differ depending on perspective. Most of us know that, but when you start really getting into it, you're like, oh, right? And you literally can just shift and be like, oh, things do look different now. We rely on evidence to construct accounts of the past. Evidence. We're not just guessing or repeating what we've heard. We must question the reliability of each piece of evidence. Don't just take it at face value. Who is it coming from? When is it coming from? Reliability. And any single piece of evidence is insufficient. You've got to build a plausible account. We talk about what is truth. And the kids are always like, how do we know if anything's true? I'm like, come on. Okay. We're going to build a bunch of evidence and we're going to call it good unless we're in the matrix. So that's our approach to history.
All right, next slide. Don't let this slide scare you. Okay. Thanks, Ms. Pierce. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about historical thinking skills. Besides being a mouthful, they are at the core of everything that we do in the history department. Each lesson leverages a different skill, and the idea is this helps our students develop the necessary tools in order to put all the pieces together and form their own opinions and views on American history. The end goal is being able to connect historical time periods such as colonial America, the American Revolution, up through the Civil War and Reconstruction, kind of fast forward in there, really finding ways to connect these topics with their lives in middle school, for students living in the 21st century. Tough to compete with Instagram and TikTok, but we're fighting a good fight. A few of the skills that we're focusing on is sourcing, which is essentially the act of understanding who wrote a document, where they wrote it, why they wrote it, for the purposes of analysis and interpretation. Some examples of these is a primary source, like we've analyzed and tried to interpret the Declaration of Independence is an easy one for us all to get behind. And a secondary source, which could be a student's textbook that we use in class. Moving on. Contextualization. Context is key to investigative historians. That's what I call my students. I'm asking them to locate documents, events, historical figures across time and space, and really place them all in the proper context. Lastly, corroboration. As we heard earlier, to quote, one story creates stereotypes. But with corroboration, it allows us to understand a more complete story, getting us closer to the almighty truth. Students consider a wide range of details across these multiple sources to determine points of agreement and disagreement across the historical spectrum. This helps our students check for accuracy of the evidence and to determine the plausibility of historical events. And piecing these all together is really what we do in our class. And pass it back to
And that's exactly how we talk in the classroom. The kids are just riveted. No, but metacognition, right? We throw that one out very early, like in the first week and a half, 2 weeks, and the kids are just like, it's just thinking about thinking. That's it. So that when you notice yourself doing something, behaving in a certain way, you stop and go, wait, why did I do that, right? We call it reflection, right? And metacognition, thinking about your thinking. And so when you look at history, if you're not thinking about why you're feeling a certain way about something or reacting to something in some way, then you're not thinking about your thinking, and that gets at your bias. And one of the things we start from the get-go is we are all biased. No, not me. Yeah, you. We all bring bias. It's called experience. And being aware of what those biases are allows you then to be able to address them. And how is that affecting the way that I study history and the way that I look at the world around me, and then judge or not judge, right? Multiple perspectives, then people don't see things the same way, obviously. But if you don't have those different perspectives and understanding of where people are coming from, when they're coming from, and their experience, then you can't really understand that full event, right? If it were simply an account of the events, we could be like done with history in a couple of weeks, and be like, here's all the facts, good, let's take the test. It's really about delving into how did people experience the same event. Right, this is why witness accounts are unreliable, right? Because we all see things a little bit differently, but they all hold a piece of the truth. So when you put that together, that's that corroboration, that mouthful of a word. That's all it is. It's just across the board, which pieces of evidence have the same type of information. Then that we can arrive at a fact. Probably happened, probably.
Thanks, Ms. Pierce. All right, moving on. So the interesting stuff. Student Spotlight, Worldview. So this particular project is really the foundation of our class. It focuses on student identity, understanding our own biases, identifying key social and political issues that our students care about, and really reflecting on what matters to us. We discuss how their worldview shapes who they are, their unique perspectives, and what they believe, ultimately how they see the world around them. So this particular assignment, some of the questions that we ask the students to explore: what do you consider to be your home? What are some events happening in the world that you feel strongly about? What are 2 to 3 or more key political or social issues that you care about? Who do you consider your family? And we have just so many amazing projects, and we're going to have Mira speak to theirs. So Mira, the floor is yours.
In my project, I had like 2 pride flags, trans flag and just queer inclusive flag, because to like represent my trans identity and my queerness. I also had Jewish Star of David to show that I am Jewish and I take pride in my religion and heritage. And I had the slogans, eat the rich, unionize, in my body, my choice, to show I'm pro-union, pro-choice, and anti-capitalism. And also my hair was blue because it was blue at the time.
Great, thank you, Mira. All right.
At the very beginning of the year, one of the first things we do is we take a class selfie. We don't give them a lot of reason why. We just simply say, I need one person to take a photo, right? They'll get their phones. It's like, no. Here's the iPad. And so the only stipulation is that it's a selfie. So they need to be in the picture, and it's a selfie of the class, including me. They're always like, oh, you're in it? Yeah, I'm in class too. So, there's some of the class selfies. So we take the picture. They get to see it pretty quickly. But the first thing is it's pretty quick. And we say, what do you notice first? And then it goes away. And they're like, wait. And then we go back to it. Now, what else do you notice? That's all I'm going to tell you for now.
Great segue. Here we go.
Should I just go?
The floor is yours.
All right, so this was our class's class selfie, and I remember when I looked back at this photo of our class, the first thing I noticed was myself, but isn't that human nature? After seeing that I didn't look too strange, I looked at the rest of the class to see where any of my friends were or who wasn't in the picture. But after our class discussion, that wasn't what I took away from the lesson, or what anyone did. That lesson wasn't about seeing our class photo. It was about seeing that the picture wasn't really our class. It was an image of our class, but it was just one piece of information, and frankly, one that doesn't give you such a good picture of us. My takeaway from that lesson was that you can never understand something from looking at just one document, or just one piece of evidence. History can only be understood by looking at multiple historical texts and pieces of evidence. And this is one of, I think, the key ideas of our class, unless I'm greatly mistaken, is to see all parts of the story. And yeah.
So in my class photo, like many others in our class, I also looked for myself first, and that can be like seen as a metaphor for like how people only look for their perspective or whatever. But basically, you may notice how like some people were grouped together, and you can perceive that as friendships and the like. And you also may notice how like some people's faces were obscured. And some people were even missing from the class altogether because they were absent. You can notice like how people may be standing awkwardly because it was sudden and just all over the place kind of, and how like some seats and desks were moved and pushed aside, which can be seen as a hurry. It's, yeah.
Very good. All right.
We'll leave that up there for just a minute. So to extend that to the approach to history, when you approach history, like Magnus was talking about, Mira's getting at, we do look for ourselves in history, right? We're like, where am I? And we're so many things. So we look at lots of things, but we're looking for a connection. We're looking for ourselves. And if you only use one piece of evidence, you're not getting a full picture. So if we looked at this, there are some people we can't see. We might think they're not there. And they were. Right, and the people who came in later or had to step out to the bathroom, or so many, and people are obscured because maybe someone's doing something that's more noticeable, so that gets all the attention, and you're like, that must be the most important thing in the room, right? So the way that you read it is an approach to history. When you look at history and events, you definitely want to use a lot of documents to get a lot of different looks and action to see what's happening, really happening. All right, so we come from the perspective of the dominant narrative, counter narrative. History is a narrative. That's one of the first things we start with. If it were a collection of facts, like I said, we'd be done in 2 weeks, we'd take the test, we'd be all good. Be like, this happened in 1776, right? So the dominant narrative is the hand that holds the pen and tells the history. What does that mean? Well, people with the power, right? Who got the pen, the person who was able to get to it. And those are the people who are the bosses, the privileged, and the dominant narrative reinforces the way things are. When people say, well, that's just the way it is, or those people have always been in power, that's because the dominant narrative, the story that's told through history, if you're not careful, is that it validates and reinforces that the people who are in power should be in power. Right? Well, it just makes sense how they got there because that's the dominant narrative being told. The pieces that you're connecting are like, oh, that makes sense. And it reinforces the people got the position because of their virtue of their class, their race, their gender, their religion, their nation. Right? So it's reinforcing that the people who are in power are meant to be in power, and that's just the way it is, the way the world works. It's a pretty hopeless narrative, and it's also one that's very incomplete. So we don't just show the dominant narrative, and in fact, when you can, you need to address that it is a dominant narrative. When it gets reinforced, if you ask people the story of an event and you hear the same thing again and again, that's probably the dominant narrative.
Which leads us to the counter narrative. So as you've heard tonight, history is a narrative. It's a story typically told by those who have the power. With that said, history changes with new information, new ideas, additional insight about the quote-unquote facts as we know them. Which characters are in the story? Who's presenting that story? Who's left out? Who's included? So on the flip side of that coin, the story told from the perspective of people without the power is just as, if not more important, I believe. A narrative that goes against or is counter to the dominant narrative can help our students strengthen their own opinions and viewpoints and give them the necessary data and evidence to back up their own claims when it comes to American history and a wide range of other topics as well in their life. One example is our current unit on Indian removal in the presidency of Andrew Jackson. We're really focusing on the Native American experience and really trying to shine light on and understand the different perspectives and piece together the experiences Indigenous peoples experienced and had in order to gain a deeper understanding and a more truthful understanding of our own history. And I strongly believe that it's through counter-narratives for our students in history and making them more and more exposed to them, the more informed they will become. Even if we don't always agree on both sides of that coin, it's important to understand and to study them both. And now, an emphasis on those counter-narratives. So this is one of our projects that we focus on, the Three Little Pigs story that we all know, the dominant narrative. We're talking about the counter narrative here, and I will pass it over to Mira.
So during the beginning of the year, we read John Sazika's story, The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. It's a reinvention of the Three Little Pigs told from the wolf's perspective instead of the pigs. And it frames the story as the wolf was just trying to get sugar for his grandma's cake, and he went to each of their houses and they rejected him instead of letting him in, and then he sneezed and blew them over, and then they died and he ate them. And at the last little pig's house, he got arrested and didn't get his story told. So he went on to tell us. So like this can show how like if we only listen to one narrative, we will not get the full story of what really happened. And it can also show how like disinformation can spread due to only having one perspective, and how people can be vilified more than they actually were, or vilified when they were not the villain due to there only being one narrative present. It can also show the idea that both perspectives could be true, but one or both could be biased in some way that is like not wanted. That's pretty much it.
Great job. Great job. All right, so on the other side, for Student Spotlight, we're going to be talking about Christopher Columbus and the counter narrative. And we do this activity around Indigenous Peoples Day. And we prompt the students with a few questions. Here's a couple examples. Why would Americans celebrate Columbus Day? We're really thinking about that dominant narrative. And secondly, how does learning about the counter-narrative of Christopher Columbus change how he is or should be remembered in history? And we'll let Magnus speak to that.
All right, so here are just like some of my takeaways from the lesson that I wrote up. So because Columbus landed in America, an estimated 20 million people died in the following years of European colonization. At the same time, Columbus gave hope to millions of Europeans about the future, and is a big reason why I and many people of European descendants are here today. Columbus is a controversial person and should be taught as such. American schools have for far too long taught Columbus as if he were a hero of Europe and America, despite the horrific violence he caused. In our class, however, we did not learn about Columbus as a hero or villain, but as a person and passed our own judgments, not based on what the dominant narrative says, but what the facts say.
Great job. We have the most amazing students, if you can't tell.
It's that.
Student Spotlight. So we're wrapping it up here with personal statements, and we'll start with Magnus, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, for me, history class has been really just a highlight of the year, and I have such a great teacher, and I think I've really definitely learned a lot, not just about history, but also about seeing the world from a different perspective, and just really more critically thinking about, everything that I know, and just kind of understanding everything much deeper than I did before. And yeah, I think those are some of my key takeaways from history that are definitely going to stick with me through my life.
Great job, Magnus. Excellent. Mira, you're up.
History always has multiple parties involved, whether it be groups or specific individuals. In our history class, we are taught the history from all the perspectives involved in order to get a better grasp on what really happened. We are not told to side with one specific group or person, but instead told what happened with all parties involved and the repercussions of these decisions, so that we can make informed choices on who to support in these just things. Having the perspective of oppressed or underrepresented people in history, along with more known perspectives, is important because it gives the chance for people's opinions to change and adapt. With knowing more about all aspects of a given time period or historic event, you can make more educated decisions on what ideals and people you believe and put your trust in. Having multiple perspectives known gives you the opportunity to have a more nuanced view on what happened, rather than the thought that one person is undeniably good and has done nothing wrong while the other is evil or straight up unknown.
Thank you for the time and future leaders coming your way.
That we always do too when we have students and staff from a school come present is to come up and take a picture with the board. And also we always give our students a little something for being with us this evening and for spending your evening out here, as opposed to what you might be doing at home, family games, whatever it might be. So thank you so much for coming. And then another little tradition we do is have the students, you are our future leaders, to come sit at the table here as if you were a trustee and get what it feels like to be up here to look out. Because one day you might very well want to be in such a role.
Maybe before we do that,
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, wait, do you have any questions?
I have a couple comments. This is by far my favorite part of this job, and the insight into watching what happens in the classroom when the parents are not there and you're not getting the one-sided angle from your child is by far the best, and from all age groups. As a parent and a trustee, the trustee aspect is fabulous because I mean we look at young kids doing what they're doing and an older group, you know, as your 8th graders. It's amazing, and to actually see how history is being taught from how history was taught to me is incredibly impressive. Because to me it was about learning, dates, facts. And we didn't really question those facts. I mean, we studied 9 planets and Pluto was one of them, and then all of a sudden I'm taught by my kid that it's not anymore. and so the concept of understanding that it's a learning process. It's not facts. It's how do you come to it. And I've been watching something, 2 points. One, and I'll try to be quick. I've been watching The Curse of Oak Island for 10 years, right? And what they're doing in this show is they're using facts, science, math, and thinking to come up with a giant picture to solve a giant puzzle. And it's fascinating. And it's just what I was, and I'm maxing out my dork factor every week watching this, but it's actually what you're doing. You're actually using facts and different perspectives and not letting your narrative actually dictate what you're finding. You're letting the facts and like studying how dating wood samples and finding where this metal came from, where it was forged, and putting all these facts together. And as young people now, too, it's a perfect opportunity to apply what you've learned when you look at coronavirus, right? Because when we looked at coronavirus, there were some people giving us one narrative, oh, it's okay, you don't need masks. And then there's other scientists that are saying, hey, this is important to do this. And everybody has to fall into place with what you believe. And as we get out of coronavirus now, like we can actually study, hey, this was right, this was not right. What did I think on day one when I took the picture? And what do I see now? And so for me, it was fabulous to see this is how we're thinking to teach how to think, not necessarily believe the facts that we're given and then the perspective that that's coming from. So very impressive, very fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
I want to say thank you. Honestly, if I had half the self-possession that you two have in the 8th grade, when I was in the 8th grade, I might be president. and I will say that, we're making history today. And Magnus, you hit on this. You're looking at this through a historical lens and questioning and looking at different narratives. But as you look at the news every day and you think, okay, that's one side. That's one viewpoint. And I like the way that you've talked about how you're applying that. And I will say, I wake up every day at my age, and I get a little disillusioned about the world that I've brought my children into. And tonight you made me feel so much better about the future. And I really appreciate you coming and being a part of this, because you really, truly give me hope that you guys, the kids are going to be all right. And I thank you for that.
And I was going to add on to that, because I think, as we mentioned, in terms of future leaders, and we were talking about having you come up and sit here, it was also very much what I was thinking of, is like you carrying that perspective and what you've learning. First, what I thought was, I hope the high schools know what they're getting. And that they've got a curriculum that also supports this type of inquiry, because if you have a teacher who doesn't support it, it can be, you're going to be challenging the dominant narratives in high school, and sometimes that can be challenging if the teachers aren't. So I hope they know what they're getting. Thank you for giving it to them, all of you. And then feeling super happy about leaders going forward, and that you really are going to be there for us as we grow older and you come and sit in these seats. And so thank you all teachers for working with and bringing this to students, and thank you for coming and sharing that with us very much. So appreciate it.
Cool. I jumped the gun here. I was going to start clapping for them. Sorry, no, I just wanted to say, so I have a student who went through White Hill, and I have one there currently, but Ms. Pierce, my son had you, and I have to say that your presentation at Back to School Night was one that really stuck with me, and it was similar themes because you were kind of explaining how you guys approach the history topic, but it was as a child, you know, you don't always have kids who come home and tell you, hey, this is what the curriculum is. So I know what I'd heard at back to school night, but I heard tonight from you two. Thank you so much for, you know, bringing to life what you guys are learning, because you can hear it from a teacher, but to hear it coming from the kids who have learned something, that's so huge. That's why we're up here. And the thing is that the things you're learning are things that I do every day as a trustee. Like, I have to look at all the different sources. I have to think, who are they coming from? Are they biased? And I have to look at all of those and make decisions based on all those different things that I collect. And all of those facts matter, and they affect all of you. But you were gaining the skills so much younger than I did. And I'm so envious, but I'm also thrilled, because you guys you're being equipped right now to sit up here. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So thank you for coming.
President.
Skip this.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for your teachers, because you know you guys make these programs work. So thank you.
Well said.
Well, I got to ask a question too. How are you all including this as part of just the overall curriculum about social media and Instagram and TikTok? And it's not just because your friend or somebody you don't know took that picture on a cruise ship. You don't see what's going on behind that life. And so from a emotional perspective and from the students, like, does that change your view on how people are looking at and consuming social media today? Or is that how do we expand that to yes, and it's not just about Columbus, it's also about that image that you're portraying in that picture. So who
do you want to answer the question?
Everybody. You. No, I guess my question is Magnus from here. Do you look at social media differently now that you have this idea that multiple viewpoints exist? This idea of thinking about what you're thinking?
Sure. I feel like I didn't really, because I contextualized, like, I was pretty much raised having social media, so I contextualized people having lives outside of it and beyond it pretty young, so I was able to know that, just because they have this one photo doesn't mean they have any less problems than someone else,
I mean, I, unlike Mira, was not raised with social media.
Nice job, Mom.
Seriously.
Not that you guys didn't do a good job. I'm so mad at this already. It's only my second meeting.
Alright, back to Max.
I mean, I feel like, so yes, I feel like this course has helped me kind of see things differently, because I've been able to see social media as like, okay, this looks like a great snapshot of time, but it's really not, and especially after the photos time, it's not actually an accurate portrayal of what's happening. And of course, if they were to post 9 different photos from different angles, maybe, but no one's actually really doing that. And I feel like that allows me to kind of think more deeply about social media and about how people's lives actually are, and not just what the pictures they post show.
Well said.
Awesome.
I love that you brought that up, because that goes to a single story, right? If you just see that, you're like, that's what their life is like. It's incomplete.
I'll add into this, and that you asked, how are we bringing this into our classrooms as well? So Amber and I are the 8th grade English teachers. This week, Magnus and Mira are both in my classroom, so sorry. But the Socratic seminar, Amber brought that into our curriculum. And this week we were talking about what is prejudice, what is racism, what are implicit and explicit biases. Will this generation be better or more inclusive of race than previous generations? And they all brought social media into that conversation about being better or not being better, and how our scroll feeds us what we ask it to feed us. And also how we have the opportunity to seek out information about others and other people groups than ourselves, to learn about them in a platform that is not asking one individual to speak on behalf of their entire people group or race, but that we are given access into lives if we seek it through social platforms. was one of the ways that they talked about it.
All right, very good. That's great. Wow.
Thank you.
All right, you guys
I'm sit over here.
Nancy, Mr. Lockwood.
And then John, Mary, Claire, come on up too.
All right, we are, that was a fantastic presentation. Now we are on to item E, communication. We have a report out from closed session. And that report, during our closed session, the board had a unanimous approval on the staff's recommended resolution for special education program dispute for student ID number 21357000123. So that's the action that we took in closed session. And now we are on to public comment regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wants to speak to items not on the agenda? Okay, no. We have our placeholder for correspondence and communication to the board. So there was a number of correspondence that has come in, and that's all up there for everybody to see. And now we are on to the presentation.
There's just one. It was one response.
Oh, there's just
from
one.
an email that was sent, that was posted up on the agenda for the last meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so we have presentation action item, which is a recommended approval. We have two. Recommended approval of a second interim budget report. So,
Chris Carson show.
Chris Carson, take it away.
Second interim budget report.
You get the clicker. So thank you for the opportunity to speak about the second interim budget report. We'll be talking this evening, much as we do with the first interim, regarding our budget information, the demographics, assumptions, revenues and expenses, and our multi-year projections. In terms of timelines, as we move forward, we do have 4 reports that we have to do every year, and this will show 5 as you look at it, but really what it does is it just repeats. It's a big cycle, and so what we're doing this evening is the second interim report. It shows our actual data as of January 31st, and normally it's due by March 15th. This year, because of calendars, what have you, it's actually due the 17th. It's a little odd, but normally it's the middle of the month. Then by the end of June, we have to do our adopted budget and estimated actuals. So it's the adopted budget for the coming year and the estimated actuals for the current year. Then we close our books by September 15th, and that's called the unaudited actuals. And December, we have our first interim. So again, we are on the second interim for the March 15th report. In terms of the report, we have to certify our budget, one of 3 things. And the best certification that you can have is positive. What that means is you can meet your current obligations, financial obligations in the current year and subsequent 2 years, so a total of 3 years. So positive is what you want. We are certifying positive. The other 2 are qualified or negative, which means that you may not meet your financial obligations as qualified, and negative is that you will not. And so those are the other 2, but again, we're positive this month. So in terms of demographics, sorry, I'm going to drink some water just for a second. What's important to note is that between the adopted budget and our budget this evening, we did show an increase in our enrollment. So that's positive. But if you look back historically, you see we were above 2,000 for 3 consecutive years. And then we've dropped significantly, and that's declining, what you would call declining enrollment. And as you start to have kids come to school every day, you get your average daily attendance, and that's how you get paid for schools. And as you have declining enrollment, less children coming to school means less money. So that it's important to note that you have the declining enrollment. as I just mentioned, as children come to school every day, you have your average daily attendance. It's simply a measure of how many children come. And so your enrollment is one number, and your average daily attendance is a percentage and number that will be less than your enrollment. And as we look at this, I did decrease between our first interim budget and our second interim budget. I decreased our average daily attendance. And you'll note that the reason I did it has to do with our average daily attendance percentage. And we were up at 95.5%. And when I started taking a look at our P1 report, which is due at the end of December, and also where we were currently moving forward, I was noticing some steep declines in our actual attendance rates. And so attendance rates that I've never seen in this district as I look back historically. Normally our historical attendance rates are roughly 96%. And so I did make that adjustment down for the current P2 attendance, which is our attendance as of April 15th, the last whole month prior to that. And I also decreased our attendance percentages in the subsequent 2 years as we look at those. So, in terms of our assumptions, one of the things as a state aid funded district that we receive a cost of living adjustment, you'll hear us call it a COLA, on our revenues. And so the amount that we get per child will go up a certain percentage. And it's important to know what those percentages are each and every budget cycle. And so in the current year, we have a 13.26% amount that we received. But with that, the actual COLA is really only 6.56%. The difference between the delta between 13.26 and 6.56 is something the governor gave as a super COLA this year. We did it at budget adoption. But the next thing that's important to note is as you look at your out years, the governor, since our first interim budget report, has released the January governor's proposal for the budget next year. And with that, his cost of living adjustment, COLA, for next year is 8.13%. I know we've talked about that, but you'll see that that's now built into our LCFF, local control funding formula calculations as we move forward into the revenues. Some other assumptions that are major assumptions for the district has to do with our state teacher retirement system, our public employers retirement system, and our state unemployment insurance. And what I've done is I've shown that here in 21-22 for STRS, we actually paid 16.92% for every dollar for the pension for the teachers. This year, it's at 19.1%. And for STRS, it's actually set in statute, so there's no additional jumps in that percentage as we move forward. So you'll note it's 19.1 as you move forward. For PERS, on the other hand, for the public employee retirement system, which is anybody who's not a teacher or certificated staff member, last year was 22.91%. It jumped to 25.37% in the current year. So it's gone up significantly as well. But then the other thing that has happened, STRS is set in statute, PERS is not, and they adjust that each and every year, and the final numbers come in May. But what they initially had estimated was 25.2%. You'll see that arrow going down. It's now 27% estimated for next year. And then the following year, it goes from 24.6 to 28. So those are some very significant increases in what would be considered our statutory benefits with respect to spend these dollars for every dollar we have in classified salaries. Kind of going back historical, I know we talked about the 19.1% for STRS. If you look back to 2013, at that time the district was paying 8.25%. You can see the historical jumps in that rate. And There was only 1 year there was a decline, and that happened when the state put some one-time dollars towards those, and it impacted the 2 years, the 20 year and 21. And so, other than that, we're paying out almost 11% more now than we were back in 2013. And so I know that our cost of living adjustments often are looked at as dollars that can be placed towards salaries, but we're having to spend more in benefits just as a matter of course without spending any additional dollars. Yes.
So in other words, the 2020 and 2021 anomaly, which is where it goes from 17 something down to 16 something, and then it hops way up to 19, it was on that trend, kind of flattened out, but then caught up.
Correct.
Did the catch up from, rather than going 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, it went 14, 16, 17, 16, 19.
Correct.
Okay.
And we don't have that same number for PERS, but if I looked back, it would do something similar. And these are slides that I have shown you in the past as well. They were on our our February budget presentation. These are slides that come from school services directly. And so this is just showing that same data that I was talking about in terms of those PERS increases and looking forward. And this one actually shows one more year out there. And so when looking at our revenues and our expenses within our second interim budget, this is our total general fund revenue. So it's both restricted and unrestricted. And we break it down to show you, we do have $31.2 million approximately. You see that down at the bottom. And of that, just under 61% is our local control funding formula. The next largest source of funding is our parcel tax, which the taxpayers of the Ross Valley School District have passed an extension most recently in 2018. And so those parcel tax dollars come in and it's just under 14.5%, so it's roughly $4.5 million. You see that there. And then we have federal, state, and other local incomes. And generally your federal and state, the bulk of your federal and state revenues are categorical funds, so they're earmarked for a certain thing.
LCFSF is on a per student basis.
Correct.
State and federal categorical funds also on a per student basis or not so much?
It depends upon the program, how it's calculated. Some it might be based upon enrollment, some it might be based upon attendance, some it might have something to do with the number of unduplicated pupils you have. So there's lots of different variations of how the revenues come in.
Okay.
And second interim in terms of general fund expenses, again, this is restricted, unrestricted. Our total expenses are just over $28.9 million. And because we are in the people business, we educate the future, as we saw this evening in the wonderful presentation earlier. You would expect the bulk of our expenses to be in the form of salaries and benefits, and you see that there, 75.5% of our total expenses. And then our next largest source of expenses are services and other operating at 5.2, and then supplies and other 1,064,000. And then the other categories are just really small dollar and percentages. And the $2.256 million difference between the revenues and the expenses is the general fund? Total general fund. Not all of it is unrestricted, and not all of it is categoricals either. So it's kind of a mixture. Okay. And a perfect example of why you might, on the categorical side, you might show all of the revenue of a grant that we receive. For example, we might have $1 million that came in the one-time instructional materials and arts and arts.
Music and instructional materials block grant.
There you go. arts, music, and instructional materials block grant. But the way that we might show it as expenses might be multiple years. And so you would be spending down those types of programs. I know that in the past year we were talking about potentially going into community funded status, which basically has to do with if we have greater property taxes than our local control funding formula says in revenues that we would have, we would get to keep the excess for property taxes. Because of that 13.26% LCFF COLA that we received, the super COLA in July, it pushed us back where we would remain in state funding. And so you can kind of see here the weight. The bulk of the revenues come to the left side, 13.26%. You see it at the bottom in the box. 13.26% LCFF COLA and 6.84% property tax growth. So the property tax growth didn't match. So again, we're going to stay in state funding as we look forward. Doesn't mean we couldn't flip back out and into community fund status, but there are a lot of factors that would have to happen for that to move us into that later on. So in terms of our funding, here, the top number on the left, you see 1,666 ADA at adopted. That was what we expected our funded ADA to be at the adopted budget in June. The other thing that they did at the budget adoption, they changed the way we were funded for our average daily attendance. And what they did is they made it so that rather than when we're in declining enrollment, what we would normally be funded on is the greater of our current year attendance at P2 or last year's. And when you're in declining enrollment and declining ADA, it's generally going to be your prior year. What they did is they changed that structure, so now there's one other thing to look at. You also have to look at the average of the previous 3 years' attendance as well. So you get funded at the greater of your previous 3 years of attendance, your prior year attendance, or your current year. And by doing that, because we declined so much because of COVID, the 3 year smoothing bumps that up, and our funded average daily attendance at second interim for the current year is 1,880, and then 1,762, and then 1,654. The reason you're seeing that decline is because we're starting to lose that 3 year hold harmless.
And if you go back to the slide that's not, is the enrollment trend slide, if you just look at this and you look at the years and you do that calculation, you can see that we're losing the benefit of our highest year prior to starting the decline.
2021.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 1920.
1922.
This is a slide that I had talked about in the last couple times we've met in discussed budget. And what's really important about this is this shows us what our cost of living adjustment is. And we currently have a 13.26% COLA. We now have an 8.13% cost of living adjustment for next year, and 3.54% is the projected for the following year. What does that do to our revenues? And what's really important to note, because the funding sources that you use to pay for things such as salaries and benefits primarily, as we look towards negotiations and things of that nature, are your parcel tax revenues as well as your LCFF. So what I've done is I've added together our total revenues just in those two areas. And last year, at the end of last year, in our unaudited actuals, we had revenues of $21,768,000. And as you move forward a year, what we have in our second interim budget is $23,440,000. And looking at that, that is a 7.68% increase. And you compare that to the 13.26%, and it's a variance of 5.58%. You see that in the number below. And you kind of carry that forward, and next year, the following year, our revenues would go up only 1.76%. We're starting to get the impacts of that declining funded average daily attendance. So it's now 1.76%. And then the following year, we're actually showing our revenues would be down over 23-24. And so that's really important to see. And I kind of wanted to show you the funded average daily attendance versus our P2 attendance, because the P2 attendance is our measure of our current attendance this year, where the funded average daily attendance is that other calculation where you get paid based upon the higher of those three. And so you can see that in each of those numbers down below. So for example, in 21-22, we were funded at 1,966. We only had 1,668. So the difference is 15%. And then you carry that forward. You have a difference of just under 14%, a difference of 6.4%, a difference of a little over 1%. So you're starting to see that those gaps change, and that's because we're losing the impacts of that 3-year averaging. So that's really, really, really important to note. Then finally, looking at our unrestricted and our restricted multi-year projections. And this is really important to note because this shows you what our total balances are and also what our unrestricted reserves are. And so as we look at this, we're showing a $2.1 million gain last year, $2.2 million right now estimated in 22-23. And our ending fund balance on the unrestricted side for the current year is estimated to be 28%, and last year was 26.5%. So there is an increase there. And so that's based on our current numbers. We do show that it would go up to 33.76 current for 23-24 in our current budget that we're adopting this evening, and 34.83% as we go into 24-25, and those are our unrestricted reserves. And so those are important. The one thing, let me go back to this. One thing that's important to note as well is we have a requirement in the state of California for a district our size. We're required to have a minimum reserve of 3%, and there is a board policy that shows that we would have an additional 7%. So our board has said that our required minimum reserve is 10%. So compare that to those that you have there this evening. So that's important to note. And then one other thing I do want to point out, I don't have a slide about it, but I was looking at other districts in the county, and I was only looking at 21-22 right now because the second interim budgets aren't out for districts, but in the coming weeks I'll be able to pull the data from some of our surrounding districts. And I looked at 8 districts, and I was looking at Miller Creek, Kentfield, Larkspur, Corte Madera, Mill Valley, Reed, Ross, San Rafael Elementary, and us. And when you look at the LCFF sources, kind of going back to this previous slide, when you look at those funding sources for 21-22, on a per student basis, based on our funded average daily attendance, the Ross Valley School District had $11,071 per child. Districts like Reed had $19,176. Ross had $18,122, and I'll present this at a later date as well with the data, and it'll be updated with the second interim as well. But those are significantly more, and
that's just LCFF. That's not all. That's not
LCFF and parcel taxes.
Okay, that's LCFF and parcel.
And the only district that is lower than us, and it's lower than us by $83, is Miller Creek. They're at $10,988. And then the next closest to us is San Rafael, $11,650. Then you start to get up even more. And so there's a large disparity. Mill Valley, $15,000. Kentfield, $16,000. So there's some really large disparities, which as those districts receive their property tax base, because the bulk of those districts are, they're either flipping back and forth to between state aid and community funded, or they're deep into community funded status. And that can show you the difference in funding levels just between us and a district, 3 miles down the road. So I also wanted to kind of point that out as we look at our revenues. We're a pretty low funded district. And I think oftentimes we're below statewide averages just because we have a low unduplicated pupil count as well.
So this slide here, it's kind of showing like how our declining ADA is kind of eating away at that COLA.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what that shows.
Okay.
So although we're getting paid on a per child basis 13.26% more.
You have X fewer students.
Because we have fewer students, it eats into those dollars.
Mm-hmm. And we don't actually receive.
So I know I've kind of skipped past this last one. Are there any questions?
I have a small question into that early slide why was our percentage of attendance down from historic 96 to 93 this past chunk? What was the vector on that?
Well, first of all, COVID has an impact. So as kids get sick, they're missing school.
But isn't that excused absence?
It doesn't matter.
It's excused, but it's not funded. The only funding you get is when you are in the seat. So no matter what reason you're absent from school.
That changed from when our kids were in school.
Okay,
Where it used to be like, make sure you call because your kid's sick and so the school gets still get paid.
But that's not
That's
been
gone.
in place, that has been out of the picture since the 80s.
Yeah.
So it's been a misnomer, a misunderstanding, an urban myth for many, many, many years about that. And so the only other way that a family or that we could get funding when a child is absent is if the child does an independent study. And the state has made independent study requirements extremely rigorous because the child has to actually be in school for the amount of time that they would have been in school. So if you're traveling as a family, then it's really hard to have your child complete the amount of work that would equate to the length of a school day. And then if the child falls behind for the length of the period of time they're on independent study, then you have to make every attempt to get them back engaged. There has to be a certain level of daily engagement. And so if all of our teachers are teaching in the classroom, who's doing the daily engagement with that child? And so it's extremely complex nowadays to even do independent study. So we do have a number of children, as we heard anecdotally from one of our principals this week at 18, our administrative team meeting, they've had a lot of kids out for trips. So where we have what we had historically in the district, where we took only Thursday and Friday off, in November around Thanksgiving, because we started to see a pattern of attendance during that week of Thanksgiving, we moved to having fall break. Now families are starting to take off the Friday before, the Thursday before the fall break. So we are seeing the impact of students not being on campus for more than simply illness. And I think another factor that COVID had is because a lot of our folks who are working, not in schools unfortunately, but outside of public education or even education, they can work remotely. And so it's easy for them to take their family and go somewhere. But that means if they go somewhere, they're taking their child out of our school or children. And so we do lose the funding for that. So that is an added downside of the COVID pandemic is although we're all back in school, there's a lot of opportunities in the workforce to be able to work remotely. So we're seeing that impact, which I do hope that as we move forward, we're able to move back into the 96% attendance rate. But as long as we have COVID and norovirus and so on and so forth, and our kids are getting sick, we are going to see a lower attendance. And so it is really important that I think that messaging that we do for families, that the only way the school gets funded is if your child is present, and there are 180 school days out of a 365-day year. So please, 180 days, please, as much as you can, have them in school. We don't want them here when they're sick.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely something we don't want to have children in school because they might end up making others sick. They may be too sick to learn anyway, so the impact.
Do you think it was more common pre-COVID that people would send their kids to school sick?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Right? And we all, right? And so...
Yeah, I think COVID has taught everybody with the highly contagious nature that we really need to stay home. There are too many folks because of the norovirus and the flu even. And the flu's changed over time. Yeah. From when I was a kid and got the flu, it's a very different disease.
So do you think, I noticed that you dropped the projected out ADA down, I mean, for 23, 24, and 24, 25, you have the first interim back up at 96 and then the second interim down at 95. Is that, given that this may be a new, lowered new normal kind of deal, because people may just now keep their kids out when they're sniffly from school on into the future, regardless of COVID, even if COVID is a distant memory, it may just be a new behavioral normal. How are you feeling about those assumptions?
They're still hoping that people come because we did have a little bit of a dip last year, but it wasn't at it was lower than the 95%. And we were hoping that we would get them back up.
We'll have to see.
It's still a guesstimate.
Because one of the conversations in Sacramento when I went for the legislative day was really urging them to rethink funding on an enrollment basis, not on an ADA basis. It just gives that level of consistency, and it's also like your expenses. It's not like you're dropping your expenses when you move from 95 to 94%. You still have the same number of everything's, right? And so for them to fund based on the ADA just doesn't seem like it's appropriate, especially if you're messaging of like, yeah, keep your kids home when they've got the sniffles because we don't want to have to pay for substitute teachers because everybody's getting sick. So how can you have both things happening at the same time? You know, cross our fingers that we can do some more advocacy around that and that the funding changes.
We'll turn off the electricity and not use any power for 4% of every school day.
Right, no, yeah, so.
But that was also part of the reason that the state, and this is part of the pushback that we get when we do talk to them about these things. They say, well, we also gave you the 3-year averaging. And so, yes, we did, but we also saw massive declines around the state.
And they're going to keep the 3-year averaging in perpetuity. It was a permanent shift?
It appears to be.
Okay.
It appears to be.
Which is helpful.
Yeah. Chris, could you, on the last page of the summary of financial multi-year projection, I'm trying to reconcile 2024-25 with the uptick in the percentage of the reserve, yet the lower ending balance.
Give me 1 second. You're talking about this one?
Yeah.
So part of the thing with the reserve is it's based upon your total expenses. So if your total expenses are dropping, so too does your requirement.
This is overlaid. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually a complex part of it. So you'll notice that we also see our expenses do change over time as well.
Yeah, I just sort of see the restricted reserve percentage uptick, expecting to see an uptick on the balance as well. But I see what you're saying, because if I overlay the other slide to this, that makes, okay.
Yeah, and then
Right.
the other thing that is important to note is this is our total ending balance, and the unrestricted ending balance is based upon a different number, actually.
Okay.
So that percentage in the number below is actually based upon just our unrestricted side. And you can get that number directly from our Form 1. I could provide it on here, but I'm trying to provide snapshots as opposed to all of the numbers, because then it just gets to be, here are our forms.
Okay.
And will the
Tie back on this page. Okay.
will the
I can show.
TK perhaps grow enrollment, or enrollment trends continue to project lower? But was there any potential we'll get 20 to 50 new TK students over the next 0 to 2 years?
Every time you have a new group of kids coming in, our projections show small incremental growth. And so that does help a little bit, but we're also seeing declining enrollment in some of the others. So as you look at our numbers, they kind of flatten out in those out years. If we didn't have the TK, we would drop even more.
And we're set to do full TK in the 23, 24, 24, 25.
25, 26.
25, 26. So it'll slowly increase. Yeah.
So when we do our adopted budget next time, I'm going to be, in June when I come back to you, you're going to see an additional year on here. We'll no longer be talking about just 22, 23 through 24, 25. We'll be adding a third year, which at that time, because 22, 23 will become our estimated actuals, and our adopted budget will be for 23, 24. So it'll be 23, 24 plus 2.
But when you look at slide 6, it still's going down.
Still
Even though
going
the
down, yeah,
TK is
the TK.
coming in,
Yeah.
it's not enough to offset the decline.
Like that other, I see that in other
in other
schools
districts.
and universities.
But it is somewhere in the range of 38 to 40 children additional in the TK. And we do have that built into our LCFF calculator specifically, because with the LCFF calculator, you actually get a additional grade span funding for the TK in particular, because there are other requirements for that program above and beyond the teacher and class size for teacher. You also have the other adult in the room.
Aid.
So they give you the aid. So they give you additional funding, and those numbers do get built into our calculator.
So tonight this is an action item, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It would be to approve the second interim budget as provided.
Presented, okay. I'm gonna go and see if there are any public comments on this item. Nope, no public comments, okay. So we'll go ahead and bring it back for any further discussion, questions, or motions.
I'll make a motion to approve the second interim budget report.
I will second that.
Right. Motion and a second. Brian?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye.
Chris, I.
Daniel?
Aye.
Okay. So we
Great
have
report. Not as fun as the student one, but very good.
Very.
Very thorough. And easy to follow, by the way.
All right, now we have a recommended approval of resolution 12-22-23, certificated local assignment authorization.
All right, you may remember, for those of you who were on the board, or those of you who were looking back at prior agendas, back in August, we did a similar approval of a local assignment option for 5 total of our 7th, 6th grade teachers. And the reason that we need to do these local assignment options is they do hold the appropriate credential. They are multiple subject holders. However, the way that the state requires credentialing is when your school offers a block schedule, your students must see their teacher, or your teacher must see their students every single day of the week. And when you're on a block schedule, as you know, not all the periods run every single day. And so because of that, the state says that if you don't see your kids every day, then you must hold single subject credentials in each of the content areas that you teach. Now, some of our 6th grade teachers do hold single subject credentials in each of their content areas, which are mainly in our cores, but because we have a trio, but typically in a core it's math, science, and English history. And for those teachers who do not have, they do hold the multiple subject credential, which if we weren't on a block schedule, they would be perfectly fine to hold those credentials. So back in August, when we did a local assignment option for one of our 6th grade teachers, we were basing that on an education code that allowed that if the teacher has 12 or more units in each of the content areas, a total of 12 units in each of the content areas, or 6 upper division units in each of the content areas that they teach, then that local assignment would work. What we learned through going through credential monitoring this year was we missed looking at the credentials in terms of they have to be semester units, and the teacher took quarter units. And so this particular teacher has more than 12 units, but it just so happens when you do the translation from semester to quarter, 1 unit shy. So therefore, we quickly scrambled so that we would not have a misassignment for that teacher. He went through another local assignment option, which is to be reviewed by a panel. And so the panel that reviewed this teacher in English and in history, both of his content areas, that process was done by single subject credential holders in each of those content areas. So teachers at White Hill, as well as one of our co-principals at White Hill, who happens to hold both of the credentials, an English and a history social science. So they did an observation, and then he also developed portfolios that showed his lessons and the sample student work. And those 3 people total, John Baker and 2 teachers at White Hill, reviewed the portfolio and did an analysis of, does he have subject matter competence? And they determined that, in fact, yes, he does. So before you tonight is the resolution to approve Aaron Hess, one of our 6th grade teachers, to be able to teach on the local assignment option. And the education code for this particular one is 44258.3. And by approving this resolution to allow him to teach, it's also otherwise known as the Craven. It's the person who authored the code. We always lovingly call it the Craven. Then he will be able to teach, and we will not have a misassignment for this teacher. We do have two other teachers at White Hill who also are through the Craven process.
We only have to do this once. We don't have to do this. We have to do this
we
every
do it annually. Yeah, and then another requirement is that he has to sign that he is consenting to teach on this local assignment option.
We do the whole evaluation thing annually.
Annually.
It's not like one. Okay.
So because as we change our curriculum, as you've seen tonight from how the curriculum has changed, and you do additional activities and things like that, it's to ensure that the person is still maintaining. But if the person has the units, you still go through it annually, but they don't have to get more units ever. Yeah. And by the way, this teacher is believing that he can get the single subject credentials, and so he's down that pathway too. So as we go forward, if he's able to get those single subject credentials in each of the content areas, then we won't need to do this annually because he'll have those 2 single subject credentials. So the motion or the action that you'd be taking tonight is to approve resolution 122223.
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Are there any questions? If not, I will go. Any public comment? No public comment? Bring it back. Very thorough.
I'll recommend approval for resolution 122223, certified local assignment authorization.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second, so we will go ahead and Ryan?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Chris? Aye. Shelley? Aye. Rachel? Aye.
Thank you so
have
much.
authorization.
Yay. Will you pass that news along to Aaron tomorrow? Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Great. Thank you.
That's
That's why you stayed.
Thank you. Okay, we have consent. We only have one consent action this evening. Any public comment on consent? No public comment on consent. Any questions on consent or any issues? Otherwise, we can entertain a motion for consent.
So moved.
I'll second it. Chris, either way. Chris, raise your hand.
Seconded, sorry.
Okay, second, so we have motion second, Ryan?
Aye.
Chris?
All right,
Rachel?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley, aye. All right. Consent. On to board business. Committee updates and reports from trustees. So this is, we have now collapsed the committee updates, reports, and announcements. So we can just kind of go down the line and you can put it all in and you don't have to think about whether this is a committee report or an update or
an announcement.
announcement. It's just letting us know about all of it, so.
and what about G?
Did I skip something? That was the consent. Consent actions?
That was, we were just on number 2 and now we've gone through G just now. Okay, perfect. Sorry,
Okay.
just making sure.
No worries. Would anybody like to go first with any updates or committee?
So just starting my committee assignments, so digging in and learning about them. So
Okay. The only thing I did was I attended the subcommittee for the committee that you're going to be joining, which is the round table, and really digging in on the collaborative work that all of the parent-teacher organizations are doing around their budgeting through an equity lens, which is super encouraging, but very complicated. And there's definitely a will. I really sense that they're wanting, the overarching theme is that all students across the district have equitable opportunity to enrichment that is provided by the parent-teacher organizations. So now it's really just a matter of what does that look like in practice? And it's really been interesting to see how over the years, how different campuses do fundraising, and some do lots of little asks and some do one big ask, and then understanding the difference between the ask and the spend. So really, and recognizing that the equity of access is on the spend part, but the equity of ask is on the ask part. And so it's been really encouraging to see the idea of like moving away from individual scholarshiping for field trips to making everybody have access. That's the point of the fundraising, is not an individual scholarship, but everybody gets to go regardless. So, but it's a lot of like spreadsheets and money conversations with 5 different entities and rewriting the roundtable agreement and that kind of stuff. So
And yes,
we're getting there.
And yes.
And yes is part of it,
And
too.
yes is part of it. So
Right.
looking at their expenditures as well and their revenues and
Yep.
making sure it's
And it's also been really heartening to see how much all of the elementary schools are embracing White Hill and recognizing the different pattern of give and spend when it comes to junior high, and realizing that all of our kids are going to end up there. So let's figure out how we can all be supportive of White Hill, because giving tends to drop off in junior high, and there's been a real wonderful recognition that as a whole district community, we want to make sure that White Hill enrichment opportunities continue on. So they're really working together on how to make that happen. So
is that true? Can we just get it? Is that true with like 5th grade families? Do they start giving less?
No,
before?
it seems to be a difference in just
the school.
The switch, the switch to, and the developmental switch that kids go through, which is like, don't be on campus, mom or dad.
Yeah.
So all of those community building activities and all those fundraising activities that you might do associated with the campus are not quite as robust, shall we say, when your kids are like, yeah, see you later. So,
interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's sad.
So that's my update on that committee.
So I
I was busy. It was a short period, but I did a lot. I visited the Yes Art display at Fairfax Library, which was wonderful. I love going and seeing what our Yes Art students are doing, and it's, it's K through 8, and it's so fun to see like all the different creative things that are being done by students all throughout our district. And I love the fact that, the library is willing to do that once a year for us. So if you haven't looked, they're still there to the 9th. I would definitely recommend seeing it. There's just some beautiful artwork up. Last night I was at White Hill for their orchestra performance, which was 5th through 8th grades playing strings, and it was Nicole Smith is the first year as an orchestra teacher. She's been a musician and teaches music for many years now, but this is her first year doing orchestra, and she has got such a passion for it, and the kids are so enthusiastic, and she's really created a great connection with them, and it came through in their music, which was just beautiful. So I was really proud of those kids. They did a great job, and the 5th graders got to play with the other kids, and they'd never played together before, and it sounded so great. So and then the last thing was I attended the MCOE speaker event that they had on the 2nd, which was a keynote speech given by Dr. Amir Whitaker, and I think Phoebe probably here went to it as well. He's a teacher, he's an attorney, he's a writer. He's done all sorts of stuff. I think he would probably maybe go. I would describe him mostly as a storyteller. He kind of came up through a rough upbringing, very underprivileged young Black man. A lot of issues with authority and the law, and it kind of is just a beautiful story of him kind of persevering and coming through it all, and how he's using that knowledge and experience to uplift youth coming up behind him. And so that was just my quick snapshot story of him. There's a whole lot more, a whole bunch of books, and it'd be interesting if you wanted to take a look. So.
All right.
Is that it?
On to our draft calendar of meetings.
All right, so if you all had a chance to review the proposed dates.
This is the carryover from the last time, right?
From our workshop where we talked about this. So just to, unless you have any questions or wondering how did I arrive at this calendar draft? Nope, everybody's clear.
Did we get on Shelley's birthday again?
Yeah. Is your birthday on the 18th? No, not this next year. Anybody's birthday on the 18th?
I was checking now.
Not
even my kids.
Daniel,
Yep.
and yours?
Yep, the 31st January.
Passed it on to you.
I'll be 39 again.
Year.
Okay.
Awesome. Oh yeah, we'll bring cupcakes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, appreciate all the time that you
Can I
put
just ask
into
though,
looking.
just quickly, I know this isn't, what month is your birthday in, Chris?
Me, December.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just get that out here, Shelley.
February.
That's right. Rachel
September.
and Ryan?
June.
Okay. Thank you. Been meaning to ask you all, so thank you for all being here tonight so that I can ask you one place. All right.
Yeah, meeting dates look good. Like I said, appreciate all of the extensive
Is this a-
detailed thought you put into
Is this an action item?
it. Is.
Yeah.
This is approving our
And
calendar.
I like that there's one meeting during the holiday palooza period too. That's always, thank you.
I'll move approval of the Board of Trustees draft calendar meetings for 23-24.
A second.
Motion and a second. Ryan.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Shelley. Aye. Rachel.
Aye.
Okay. We have an approved calendar for next year. And let's see, we've got 2 sets of minutes.
And I would like to note on item H3 that there was a correction. Thank you so much, Rachel, for seeing that.
H4? On H4.
Wait, which one are we looking at?
Oh, sorry, it's the regular meeting, yes.
The regular meeting, H4.
Yeah, I'll wait. Sorry.
Okay, so H3, the special meeting, no corrections.
No corrections.
Okay.
So we'll just do these one at a time. Did anybody have any other questions or?
No. I move approval for the Board of Trustees special meeting minutes for March 1st, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Rachel.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Shelley. Aye. Ryan.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're on to 4 with the
Now we're on
correction.
And the correction is, so just when Teresa does the draft of the minutes, there's some placeholders there. And neither she nor I caught that the placeholder ended up filled with what actually occurred at the meeting. So it had the word stuff there. And so she usually goes back and fixes all of that. She has a new system now that'll be some X's. Those are going to be a little more, they'll be noticeable to us, so we won't miss it again. But that was the correction.
I appreciate the amusement when I was reading this.
It was a test for everyone else.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, so motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes from 3/1/23.
I'll second.
All right. Chris?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye. Okay. All of those minutes are approved. Wonderful. On to cabinet updates.
All right, given the time this evening and knowing that we're going to need to go back into closed session, I'm going to pass. So turn it over to my colleagues. Chris?
You have 2 things real fast. We had our second meeting of the 7-Eleven committee on Monday, and we also have scheduled for the entire month of March, and we'll be meeting weekly on Monday evenings at 4, from 4 to 6. So that our next one will be this coming Monday as well. So I just wanted to make sure that the governing board knew about that. And the other thing is that I know we have another atmospheric river coming in, so my staff and I have already been planning how we'll be dealing with it. We'll be also watching what happens, but we've also made plans. We do have floodgates for the doors at White Hill, so we're planning to put those in if necessary, and then remove them when necessary. It just takes a couple minutes to put them up.
It's been moved up to Thursday, right? Because it was going to come on Friday.
Yes.
Right, okay.
I thought it was coming in tomorrow.
Thank you
Okay,
guys for preparing for that, because, you know, just a thank you for preparing for that.
Yes.
Ahead of time and thoughtfully, and you can't just get those gates at the hardware store, so thank you.
And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Director of Student Services, Eric Sable.
Nothing from Student Services.
Thank you so much. And Julia Wolcott, Director of Curriculum and Instruction and some HR.
Couple of things. We had a delight meeting on Monday with our teacher leadership group and used that as one of our opportunities to seek input on the LCAP. And so we took a look at the 3 different LCAP goals and the associated actions. And for each of those, teachers worked in groups thinking about where are we really showing progress and where do we need to focus our energy, and then also whether there are any things that we need to adjust, because it was written a couple of years ago and things changed. So it was a really good meeting, and I look forward to bringing the same process to Superintendent's Council, which I think is on March 24th.
Yes.
So that will be happening then. And then another really important set of meetings that Marcy and I got to join as a part of our Brookside principal hiring process. We met with kids. And so we met with our kindergarten through 2nd grade students, and we met with 3rd through 5th grade student representatives. And they were very, very helpful. And we asked them exactly the same questions that we asked of our staff and that we asked of our parent and guardian community. They were particularly helpful with what makes a good leader. I loved a 1st grader who said that it's important to be firm, but also to have a gentle word. And a 3rd through 5th grade student who said that you really need to know the difference between when a student does something without meaning to and when they do it with intent. Those were the words that they used. And then everyone, K through 5th grade, wants to keep the bear badges. So really helpful there.
And Daniel and Chris, did your kids come?
Yeah, Austin reported out tonight about the input that was sought, and he said, is it really going to make a difference? I said, absolutely. I said, all of this is going to make a difference. So he was like, okay. So.
And my kindergartner said she was so excited, and she said, I get to select the next principal. No. She said, I have sad news. Our current principal's leaving. But the good news is I get to pick the new principal. I said, yes, you do, Vivian.
It's like when they take children's drawings and make them into real life things, you know.
Yes. But
I wonder what that principal will look like and have her draw a picture of them.
she was sad.
Yeah, it was sad.
Judith is leaving.
We all are very
She was
sad.
really sad about that. I was surprised. Not like just because you don't know the relationship as a parent, what your who your kid has relationships with, on the campus.
And they talked about how Judith knows exactly the right thing to say to every child that was around the room. She always has the right words. And she knows.
It was clear they feel that they can talk with her. And remember the comment too about somebody who, when something happens, they'll come into the classroom and they'll support everybody and help them to work through it, which is just beautiful. So actually, it really was.
It was
pretty
yeah,
amazing.
this is our first time doing it with young kids like this, and it was awesome. They were
great.
Yeah, and they gave really good tips and good input. It wasn't. I mean, there were, of course, a couple, with extending recess, but some other really critical ones.
More than a couple.
But I'll tell you, what they did ask for is, can the new principal please get a new lunch program?
Yeah.
And we explained what principals, were responsible for and where, they don't have a lot of leverage. And right now, there is only one food service provider for the Bay Area.
Oh my goodness.
And then they were surprised. I'm like, well, maybe we should grow our own. Can't we just stop getting food from this? They were great. They were awesome.
Yeah, I had a bunch of fourth graders come up to me after I was elected, and they said, "So you're going to change the lunches, right?"
That's why I ran. That's why.
Instead, I made them pie and beans and brought it to school. But no, yeah.
It was fun. It was great.
Really helpful. Any other? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. It is at, what time is it here exactly? It is 8:53. And we are, we're going to go ahead now and do a continuation of our closed session. So we're going to need to recess into our closed session. So at 8, we will recess into closed session at 8:53. All right, we are ending the closed session and reconvening an open session with a report out from the closed session at 10:30. The only thing to report out from the continuation of the closed session is on item B5. The board took action on a separation agreement for a permanent certificated employee effective June 9th, 2023, and that was unanimously approved. So that's the only thing to report out from the continuation of our closed session. We're on to the meeting review. It's late, so any board topics, send them to Marcy, and we can add them on to our next board meeting agendas, looking out into the future. And we'll go ahead and, I don't think there's anything to debrief, so we can go ahead and close the meeting at 10:32.